My name is Claire Jensen. I built a cybersecurity firm valued at $200 million. But at my twin brother's wedding, they sat me next to the kids' play table, called me just the nanny, and that's when I decided to cancel the deal that would have saved their company from the collapse. I didn't say a word. I smiled, even helped cut the cake. But inside, something snapped. Let me tell you how we got here. Because it didn't start with $50 million on the table. It started with two kids riding bikes in the driveway, one boy always in the spotlight, and one girl always just there. Daniel and I were inseparable growing up. We were twins, yes, but more than that, we were teammates. Built forts together, swapped Halloween candy, stayed up whispering about aliens and hackers and how one day we'd change the world. But as we got older, something shifted. I noticed it in the way Dad's eyes followed Daniel when he walked into the room, lit up, proud. I noticed how Mom always introduced me as the quiet one, while Daniel got the future CEO. When we turned 16, they bought him a car. I got a planner. "You're so organized," they said. "That's your strength." Funny how you learn to shrink yourself without even realizing it. But I didn't stop building. While Daniel chased shiny things, startups, seed rounds, failures I wasn't supposed to mention, I stayed in the shadows, coding at 3 a.m., pulling coffee-fueled all-nighters, turning small freelance gigs into a fortress of firewalls and encryption. Jensen Security was born in a spare room with 2 laptops and a busted secondhand router. By 28, I had over 100 clients, including 4 Fortune 500 companies. No one in my family ever asked how. They knew I was doing something with tech, but it never seemed to interest them. What they did care about was Daniel's next pitch deck, his new app, his bleeding burn rate startup that kept changing names. Then came the call. Daniel was in trouble. His latest venture, some fintech Frankenstein with no real product, was weeks away from folding. He needed investors. He needed a miracle. And I had $50 million sitting in a growth fund, earning 5% and collecting dust. I didn't hesitate. I drew up the terms. I made the offer. It wasn't charity. It was a strategic investment. I would clean up the mess, install real infrastructure, and quietly steer the company into stability. We signed the preliminary papers. The deal was set to close in 3 weeks. Then came the wedding. Now, let me paint you the scene. It was a vineyard venue, all Pinterest perfect. The Jensen clan was out in full force. My parents beaming, Daniel glowing, and me, wearing a designer suit that cost more than their flower budget, seated at the kids' table. Literal juice boxes. Crayons. The kicker? My place card read, Claire. Nanny, Daniel's side. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds. Then I laughed. Because of course they didn't see me. Later that evening, Aunt Louise leaned over and said, "Claire, dear, it's so lovely that you could make it. I always thought you'd end up as a teacher or something sweet like that." I smiled. "Actually, I run a cybersecurity firm." "Oh?" She blinked. "Like antivirus and stuff?" I let that hang in the air. No point in explaining threat intelligence networks and zero-day exploits to someone who still uses AOL. But what got me, what really did it, was when Daniel came over, tipsy and smug, and said, "Thanks for playing along today. You know how appearances matter. You're not technically family of the bride, so seating was a little tricky." Playing along? I was the reason he still had a company. I was the reason they could afford this damn wedding. I left before dessert. Didn't cause a scene, didn't yell. I just walked out, called my lawyer, and told him to kill the deal. No explanation. No call to Daniel. Let them figure it out. You see, I used to think family meant loyalty. That blood overrode everything. But what I learned that night is this: people will write their own stories about you. And if you're not careful, they'll make you the side character in your own life. Well, not anymore. I'm not the nanny. I'm not the quiet one. I'm not sitting at the kids' table ever again. And Daniel. He'll survive, or he won't. That's no longer my concern. What matters is this: I've built something real. And from now on, I decide where I sit. Even if it's at the head of the table. Alone. People like to romanticize twinhood. They imagine two perfectly synced souls, trading thoughts across the room, finishing each other's sentences. And yeah, maybe for a while, that was us. Daniel and I shared everything as kids: birthday cakes, scraped knees, inside jokes that only made sense to us. We built Lego cities and tore them down in epic battles. We made comic books and dreamed up secret codes. We were partners in crime, storming the neighborhood like we ran it. But something shifted along the way. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow drift. The kind you don't notice until you look up one day and realize the person who used to stand beside you is now on a completely different shore. It started in the middle school. Daniel hit his growth spurt first. Got tall, got fast, joined every team he could find. My parents beamed from the bleachers like he'd cured cancer with a soccer ball. Meanwhile, I was in the robotics lab, building drones out of scrap and learning Python from YouTube. No one came to those competitions, not once. I remember bringing home a first-place trophy from the state science fair. Mom smiled, said, "That's nice, Claire," and then asked if I could set the table. Daniel had just scored 2 goals in a junior varsity match. They were planning a dinner for him. That was the beginning of the forgetting. I wasn't the loud one. I wasn't the athlete. I wasn't the one they bragged about at dinner parties. I was just the other one. But I had a plan. If I couldn't be seen in their world, I'd build my own. I buried myself in science and math. I got into Stanford with a full ride, studied computer science, focused on network security. I was the weird girl in class who loved cracking encryption protocols more than going to frat parties. And I didn't care. I had work to do. By 24, I'd already started building CentraVault, my cybersecurity firm. It began as a consulting gig for a healthcare startup trying to patch its data leaks. Word spread. Soon I was managing security frameworks for banks, law firms, tech companies that couldn't afford to be sloppy with secrets. I built a product that didn't just protect companies. It protected people, their data, their privacy, their lives. And yet, somehow, my parents still introduced me as Daniel's sister at family events. Daniel, meanwhile, burned through idea after idea. A social app for pet lovers, a dating platform powered by neuroscience, a fitness brand that promised results through AI-optimized motivation. Whatever that meant, none of it stuck, but it didn't matter. There was always someone around to float him the next round of funding. Always a lifeboat. Then came Madison Holt. She was polished, charming, came from a family that owned half the biotech real estate in Northern California. When she and Daniel got engaged, it was like the Jensens had hit the jackpot. Suddenly, Daniel wasn't just the golden boy. He was royalty by association. Madison's family owned StratusCore, a cloud solutions company that had been bleeding slowly for years. Clunky systems, outdated architecture. They'd built it on smoke and ego, and now the fog was clearing. But they had something valuable, data, lots of it, and no idea how to protect it. That's where I came in. Daniel reached out one night, said he had an opportunity, said StratusCore was about to tank unless someone came in and rebuilt the engine while the plane was still flying. I'll be honest, I almost hung up. But then he said the words, "I need your help." It wasn't just that the company needed cybersecurity. They needed direction, leadership, a total infrastructure overhaul. I ran the numbers, knew I could stabilize it, turn it around, profit within 18 months. All I needed was access and equity. We made the deal. Quietly. I didn't want the press. I didn't want Madison's family thinking I was just another investor playing savior. I just wanted to fix the system and finally prove, maybe to them, maybe to myself, that I wasn't the sidekick anymore. Then came the wedding. You already know what happened there. The seating chart, the nanny name card, the offhanded dismissal like I was lucky just to be breathing the same air. But what I didn't say in that moment, what I haven't said out loud until now, is that this wasn't about one insult. This was about years of erasure, a lifetime of being treated like a footnote in Daniel's story. So I walked away from the deal, from the family, from the version of myself that kept trying to win their approval. Because here's the truth. I didn't need them. I never did. CentraVault is now one of the most trusted cybersecurity firms on the West Coast. We've just closed a partnership with a major federal agency. I've built a team of engineers and analysts who know exactly what they're doing, and I pay them what they're worth. Meanwhile, StratusCore's been radio silent. I've heard through the grapevine that Madison's family is scrambling for new investment. Daniel's charm has a shelf life, and it seems like it's finally expired. As for me, I'm not angry. Not anymore. I'm focused. The world doesn't make space for women like me. Not willingly. You have to carve it out yourself, with your own hands, and then defend it like hell. But here's the part. No one tells you. Once you stop chasing approval, once you stop asking to be seen, you become impossible to ignore. So, no, I'm not the forgotten twin. I'm the one who remembers everything, and I'm just getting started. I never wanted a spotlight, just a seat at the table, earned, not given. So when the opportunity came to protect StratusCore, I didn't walk in wearing a Jensen name tag. I walked in with leverage, a strategy, and a holding company no one would question. The contract was signed under CJ Tech Holdings, $50 million, full cybersecurity audit, infrastructure rebuild, data encryption overhaul. It was one of the largest contracts I'd ever issued, and they signed it without hesitation. No one asked who CJ was. Not Madison, not her board, not Daniel. They saw a solution on paper, a firm with credibility, history, and results. They didn't care about the name, just the promise. And I delivered that promise, line by line, through every clause, every invoice, every encrypted packet flowing into their dusty servers. I didn't do it for revenge. Not then. At first, I thought maybe this was the way to earn it, their respect. I thought, maybe if they see me save the thing they've all staked their names on, maybe then they'll finally see who I really am. Not Daniel's sister, not the nanny, not the girl who got the science trophies they never came to see. Just a professional, a damn good one. We started the work immediately. My engineers set up remote tunnels into StratusCore's system architecture. We found vulnerabilities the size of sinkholes, passwords stored in plain text, no endpoint protection, a complete lack of network segmentation. One breach, and their whole castle would have collapsed. We patched everything, quietly, efficiently, invisibly. That's the thing about cybersecurity. When you do it right, no one notices. No alarms, no drama, just silence. Safety. And that was fine by me. Let Daniel stand in front of the board and take the credit. Let Madison's father toast his son-in-law's strategic genius. Let them keep believing a miracle investor swooped in to save the day. Because one day when the dust settled and the numbers spoke louder than champagne toasts, they would have to ask, who made this happen? And they'd find out. Or at least that's what I told myself. But weeks passed, then months. The company stabilized. Profits turned from red to black. Employee turnover dropped. Clients started renewing contracts they were ready to abandon. Everything was running smoother than it had in years. Still, no one asked about the firm behind the firewall. I remember sitting alone in my apartment one night, watching a clip of Daniel on some tech podcast. He was in a blazer, smiling like he belonged in that chair, saying things like, "We restructured our data systems with help from a great outside partner. It's all about finding the right people." No name, no thanks. Just vague praise tossed into the void. I stared at the screen, half expecting him to say it. "Just say it, Daniel. Say who did it. Say my name." But he didn't. And for the first time since this entire thing started, I felt something darker than disappointment. I felt stupid. I had tried to earn my place in their world with results, with merit, with quiet excellence. But it turns out, in their world, merit only matters if it comes with a familiar last name, or a flashy pitch, or a story they can own. And they would never own mine. Because my success wasn't convenient. It didn't fit their narrative. It didn't flatter them, so I stayed hidden until I didn't. One day, during a quarterly review call with Stratuscore's CFO, the man, who had never spoken to me directly, requested a breakdown of their latest compliance upgrades. I said, "Sure. I'll send the audit log. You'll get it from C. Jensen's team." He froze. "Sorry, C. Jensen?" "Claire Jensen, founder of CJ Tech Holdings. We operate as a security wing under Centra Vault." There was a pause, then another. I could hear the pieces falling into place on his end. The emails, the initials, the contract, the audit trail, the silence, the name they'd seen 100 times without connecting the dots. He cleared his throat. "You're Daniel's sister." "No," I said, calm as ice. "I'm the reason your servers aren't a crime scene." After that, everything changed. Whispers started, questions bubbled up. Daniel called me that night, voice tight, somewhere between shocked and angry. "You've been behind CJ Tech this whole time?" "I have." "You didn't tell me. You didn't ask." He went quiet. Then, in a tone I'd heard too many times growing up, accusation wrapped in entitlement, he said, "Were you trying to embarrass me?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Daniel, you did that all by yourself." He didn't like that. The next week, Madison's father called. Polished, polite, corporate concern in his voice. "We just want to make sure there was no misrepresentation in the contract. You understand? Transparency is important." I told him to read the fine print. Every clause was legally sound. Every deliverable exceeded. If anything, they owed me more than the original agreement accounted for. But that wasn't what he was really asking. What he meant was, "How dare you do this without our permission?" What he meant was, "How did we let someone like you get this far without noticing?" And I realized then, this wasn't about pride. It was about power, control. They couldn't stomach that a woman they'd dismissed, underestimated, and literally placed at the kids' table had just played the most sophisticated long game they'd ever seen. I didn't need their blessing. I had already won. The contract remained intact. My team continued their work, but the dynamic shifted. They now knew the name behind the curtain. And every time a system pinged clean, every time a security risk vanished before becoming a headline, they knew exactly who to thank. Not that they ever said it, but they didn't need to. Because for once, they knew. I didn't build my company to get revenge. I didn't build it to prove anything. But sometimes proving people wrong becomes a byproduct of doing things right. So now, when I walk into boardrooms or meet with investors or negotiate federal contracts, I do it without apology, because I've already done the thing they said I couldn't. Quietly, perfectly, invisibly, but not anonymously, not anymore. It was supposed to be a break, a pause in the war, a weekend to just exist. No firewalls, no contracts, no code, just a vineyard, overpriced champagne, and family playing nice. Daniel's wedding was held at some sprawling estate in Napa Valley, the kind of place with old oak trees wrapped in fairy lights and string quartets playing acoustic Taylor Swift like it was Vivaldi. It screamed money, or at least the performance of it. Elena came with me. She's my COO, my partner in business and in life. She's the person who pulled Centravault out of its first nosedive when I tried to do everything myself. She's also the only one who's seen me spiral at 3 a.m. and still wanted to stay. She wore a sharp navy suit. I wore a dress I hated but knew photographed well. We looked good, polished, ready to face my family with grace. We arrived early because I still believed maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe the past was just miscommunication, not malice. I wanted to give them that chance. We checked in at the welcome desk, where a too-cheerful wedding planner handed us our name cards like party favors. Claire Jensen, table 19. Elena Morales, table 19. I looked at the diagram behind her. Table 19 was in the far corner of the outdoor tent, wedged between the kids' art table and the photo booth, next to a giant inflatable balloon arch and a man dressed as a magician making balloon giraffes. I blinked. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm Daniel's sister, one of the original Jensens. Also, I'm a confirmed stakeholder in Stratuscore, which, last I checked, is funding the wine for tonight. I should be at table 2, where the family is." The planner's smile twitched. "Yes, I understand. But Madison insisted this would be a more relaxed environment for you. She said you'd feel more comfortable here." More comfortable, by the ice cream cart. I stood there trying to process it, trying not to let the heat crawl up my neck. Elena gently touched my arm. "We don't have to stay," she said, low, firm, grounding me. But I wasn't ready to walk. Not yet. Not until I looked up and scanned the main tables. And there he was. Daniel, standing at the sweetheart table, laughing with Madison, wearing the watch I gave him when we were 21 and broke and swore we'd build empires together. He caught my eye. And then he looked away. He knew this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't Madison being clueless or the planner improvising. This was deliberate. They stuck me at the kids' table on purpose. The message was loud and clear. You don't belong with us. And maybe the worst part? He didn't have the spine to say it himself. So we sat. Elena, ever the sport, made balloon animals with the flower girls and let them glitter bomb her sleeves. I forced a smile, took a glass of juice, and tried not to shatter the plastic cup in my hand. People passed us like we were invisible. No one asked what I did. No one brought up CJ Tech. I heard someone call me the help in a whisper that wasn't low enough. At one point, Aunt Karen leaned over and said, "Oh, Claire, you were always so quirky. I love that you're doing your own thing." What was it again? Babysitting tech? Babysitting tech. I almost laughed. If I weren't so used to it, I might have cried. An hour in, I excused myself and stepped outside. I needed air. I needed distance. I needed to stop myself from burning the place to the ground. Elena followed. "Say the word," she said. We walk. I looked back at the glowing tent, the perfect picture of celebration. White roses, curated smiles, the illusion of a family that had room for everyone except me. "No," I said. "We stay." "Why?" Because I want them to see me. They don't, she said gently. I know, but I want me to see me. I want to sit at that goddamn kids' table and remember exactly what it feels like, because I'm never sitting there again. We walked back in. I didn't touch the food. I didn't dance. I didn't fake it for anyone's comfort. When the speeches started, Daniel stood up, glass in hand, and said something about family, loyalty, and how every person here has shaped who I've become. I didn't clap. I didn't even blink. Because the man giving that speech wasn't my brother. Not anymore. He was someone else. Someone who had chosen perception over truth, appearance over bond, power over people. That night, back in the hotel, I didn't sleep. I pulled out my laptop and went through the CJ Tech reports, the audit trails, the progress charts. We'd saved their company, stabilized their chaos, made them millions, and they sat me next to a balloon giraffe? I could have exposed them, gone public, used the press or the board or the numbers, but I didn't. Because humiliation wasn't the goal. Clarity was, and now I had it. This wasn't about what they thought of me. It was about what I knew of me. They could diminish me all they wanted, but they couldn't erase the proof. The systems I rebuilt, the data I secured, the empire I built from scratch with fire in my chest and code on my screen. I used to think belonging came from being invited in. Now I know. Sometimes it comes from walking out and never asking again. There's a moment right before you break the silence, when the whole world holds its breath. It's the moment where you stop asking if you should say something and decide you will. That moment came during the toast. We were an hour into the reception. The sky over Napa was turning gold, the vineyard glowing like a painting. People were tipsy, loosening ties, twirling around on a rented dance floor that had been flown in from Italy, or so someone bragged. I was back at the kids' table, untouched champagne in my hand, Elena beside me like a lighthouse. And on stage, Madison's father was raising his glass, launching into a carefully scripted tribute. To the future, to legacy, to the strength of partnerships, both in love and in business. I knew what was coming. I could feel it like static in my chest. The speech would pivot into Stratus Core. The deal? The saviors who had helped turn it around. And I would sit there, like I always had, silent, overlooked, polite. But not this time. I stood up, walked slowly toward the stage. No rush, no drama, just purpose. I could feel eyes shifting toward me like dominoes. One head turned, then another, then another. The father of the bride paused, unsure whether to continue. I stepped up beside him and calmly took the mic from his hand. He looked stunned. The crowd looked curious. Daniel froze mid-laugh. I took a breath. To Madison Holt and Daniel Jensen, I said, my voice carrying across the vineyard like a blade. Congratulations, a beautiful wedding truly. People smiled. Applause started to flutter, confused and polite. And to Stratus Core, good luck replacing Centrivault services. Silence, pin drop silence. I let it hang there, then added, effective immediately, your contract is canceled. A sharp inhale rolled through the crowd. Some gasped, some just blinked, trying to make sense of what they'd just heard. Then I heard a thud, and turned just in time to see Madison faint. She hit the floor like a felled mannequin, elegant, unconscious chaos in a $1,000 dress. Her mother shrieked, and then Daniel. He was already charging toward me, red in the face, voice cracking. "You can't do this," he yelled, cutting through the music, the murmurs, the crumbling illusion. I looked at him, calm, controlled, dangerous. "I already did," I said. He stopped at the foot of the stage, breathing like a cornered animal. "Claire, this is insane. You'll destroy everything." "No," I said. You did that? When you decided my name didn't belong on the contract? When you pretended not to know who built the foundation under your feet? He opened his mouth, probably to lie, to spin, but I didn't give him the chance. This wasn't personal, I said. Not until you made it that way. You knew who I was. You knew what I'd done. And still, you sat me at the nanny table. I turned to the crowd now. Some were standing. Others were still glued to their seats, watching like it was theater, which I suppose it had become. For months, Centrivault provided security for StratusCore. We fixed your mess, quietly, professionally, anonymously. You didn't ask who was doing the work because you were too busy polishing the surface. I held up the mic like it weighed nothing. But I'm done working in the dark. I'm not your tech girl in the shadows. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your sister when it's convenient. I'm the reason your company survived the quarter. Someone in the back clapped. Just one person. Then another. Daniel looked around like he'd lost control of the room. Because he had. You don't get to make this about you, he snarled. No, I said softly. I'm making it about truth. I handed the mic back to the stunned MC and stepped down. Elena was already at the edge of the dance floor, her hand out. We didn't run. We walked, heads high, past the stunned guests, past Madison's lifeless form being fanned with a napkin, past my parents who looked like someone had just revealed a second moon. Outside, the air was cooler, cleaner. We reached the car, and I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. You good? Elena asked. I looked at her, smiled. I'm free? The fallout hit the next day. StratusCore's stock dipped. Tech blogs picked up the clip. Someone had recorded the whole thing. Of course they had. The headline on TechCrunch? Cybersecurity Queen nukes. Wedding and $50 million power move. I didn't do interviews. I didn't issue a statement. I didn't need to. The contract was legal. The termination clause had been triggered the moment they violated the NDA by publicly naming vendors in their earnings call, another thing Daniel had signed without reading. Meanwhile, our inbox exploded. Clients, investors, partners. Everyone wanted to work with the woman who had the guts to take a stand and the track record to back it up. But what mattered more than business was what I saw in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see the girl trying to be accepted. I saw a woman who no longer asked. I was done shrinking, and the world would never forget my name again. Power doesn't change people. It just reveals what was always hiding underneath. After I dropped the mic at the wedding and walked out with Elena, I thought that was the end of it. The end of pretending. The end of swallowing disrespect. The end of sacrificing my voice for their comfort. But I was wrong. It wasn't the end. It was the ignition. Within an hour, the phones at StratusCore's headquarters were ringing off the hook. Legal, PR, the board, Madison's family's attorneys. You don't yank a $50 million contract out from under a failing tech company and just disappear quietly. Not when their public image is stitched together by illusion and denial. I didn't have to say anything. I'd already said enough. Instead, I watched the storm build from the safety of my apartment, barefoot, with Elna beside me and my laptop open. I kept one eye on the firewall dashboard, because old habits die hard, and the other on the news feeds lighting up like Christmas. And then the meeting happened. StratusCore called an emergency board session. Of course they did. I wasn't invited. But someone made sure my words still echoed in the room. That someone was Robert Miles, a senior board member, ex-SEC investigator, and the only person in the company smart enough to actually read the contract and the audit trail I'd left behind. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just leaned forward at the glossy walnut conference table, and dropped the second match on the pile of dry straw they'd been sitting on. "Claire Jensen saved your company from an SEC breach 2 weeks ago," he said. Dead silence. "Without her intervention, your client-side encryption failures would have triggered a federal investigation. The risk exposure alone could have buried you. No one at this table even knew the breach existed because Centrivault caught it before the regulators did." He paused, let it sink in. "And here's the kicker," he added. "That cybersecurity firm you've all been calling a third-party vendor, Centrivault, it's hers. She built it. She ran it. She saved you." Daniel's mouth reportedly fell open, but no sound came out. Madison's father turned white. Not pink, not pale. White. He stood. "Is this true?" Daniel looked like someone had unplugged him. He couldn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he did. He'd known. Deep down, somewhere under all that ego and ambition, he'd known exactly who he'd been leaning on. And he still let them stick me at the nanny table. Robert didn't wait for a reply. He slid a folder across the table. Internal logs, email trails, proof of breach detection, and my signature on the termination clause they'd triggered when Daniel grandstanded about data sovereignty in a public investor call. That call violated the confidentiality clause. That call gave me the legal out. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the truth to breathe. And now it had. I wasn't in that boardroom, but I didn't need to be. The silence afterward told me everything. The fallout was already happening in real time. People were making calls. Lawyers were rewriting their talking points. Panic had replaced pride. And then, like gasoline to a fire, the headline dropped. I didn't plan it, but someone in that room leaked the story, and by midnight, it was everywhere. Woman saves brother's company, gets seated with the nannies. There it was. Simple, brutal, unforgettable. It hit Twitter like a wrecking ball. TikTok lit up with dramatic reenactments. Someone even recreated the wedding reception using Barbie dolls and balloon giraffes. I watched the chaos unfold with a calm I didn't expect. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, but I didn't. I felt done. Not defeated, not bitter, just finally done trying to make people see what they never wanted to see. They couldn't erase me now if they tried. Stratus Corp's stock took another hit. Investors began questioning everything. Reporters knocked on my door. Elena fielded calls from CNN and Forbes. I stayed silent, issuing only one statement through my lawyer. Centrivault acted in good faith and exceeded all contractual obligations. Termination followed a documented breach of agreement, no further comment. Professional, clean, bulletproof. Daniel tried calling. Once, no voicemail. I didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. His silence at the wedding was louder than any apology he could offer now. Madison's family went into PR overdrive, spinning stories about miscommunication and unfortunate misunderstandings. But the internet wasn't buying it. Neither were their shareholders. Meanwhile, Elena and I poured ourselves whiskey and sat out on the balcony. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. Number, I didn't do anything. I just stopped hiding. We clinked glasses. I watched the city lights shimmer below, thinking about everything I'd built in the dark. Every firewall, every protocol, every ounce of protection I gave people who never once thought to protect me. They didn't see me because they didn't want to, until I made myself undeniable. So here's the truth, raw and simple. I saved their company. I got seated with the nannies. And I walked out with my power intact. In business, there's a rule no one says out loud. Power is perception. And once that perception cracks, everything starts to slide. Within 48 hours of the wedding fallout, Stratus Corp lost its two largest investors. Not because I canceled the contract. That was just the spark. They pulled out because the illusion was shattered, because the public saw a company built on smoke, running on favors, and protected by a woman they never bothered to acknowledge. And once that truth hit the headlines, no one wanted to be caught holding stock in a lie. The calls started coming, not to Stratus Core, to me. CentraVault got 3 acquisition offers within 24 hours. 2 from competitors trying to buy credibility. 1 from a defense tech firm that offered double valuation and full control. We didn't take any of them. Elena said it first. We're not for sale. Not now. Not like this. And she was right. This wasn't our exit. It was our entrance. We were no longer operating in the shadows. No more anonymity. No more initials hiding my name in some shell corporation. People knew who I was now, and more importantly, what I'd built. I was finally visible, but not everyone handled that so well. A week after the news broke, my father called me. It was early. I was in the office before sunrise, staring at server logs like I always did when my brain was too loud to sit still. The phone buzzed. His name lit up. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then answered. His voice was different, softer, fragile in a way I'd never heard before. Claire, he said, already cracking. I just saw everything. The wedding, the news, all of it. I waited. I didn't know what you'd done, what you built. I mean, I saw the name, CentraVault, but I never knew it was you. I almost reminded him that I'd told him years ago, that I'd emailed him the launch deck, sent him articles, tried desperately to share every milestone, only to be met with lukewarm replies and redirected questions about Daniel. But I didn't. He took a shaky breath. I'm sorry we never saw you. I mean, really saw you. There it was. The apology I'd imagined as a kid when they skipped my robotics finals to make Daniel's soccer game. The one I wanted when I got my scholarship to Stanford, and no one asked what I was studying. And for a split second, it landed. But it didn't stick. Because something inside me had shifted. I stopped needing you to, I said. Not cold, just true. There was silence on the other end. The kind of silence that sounds like something breaking gently without drama. He whispered, I'm proud of you. And then I hung up, not out of cruelty, out of clarity, because for the first time I didn't need that pride to mean anything. I already knew my worth, and I was just getting started. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a packed room in downtown San Francisco, cameras flashing, journalists scribbling, as I launched the next chapter of my life, Project Unseen, a $100 million venture fund dedicated to women who, like me, had been overlooked, underestimated, talked over, and told to be patient while less competent men leapfrogged past them. The name wasn't just branding, it was a statement, because for years, I was the smartest person in rooms that pretended I wasn't there. I knew what it felt like to raise your hand and be ignored, only to watch a man say the same thing 5 minutes later and get applause. I knew what it meant to build in the dark, alone, tired, uninvited, and I also knew how to win anyway. So Project Unseen wasn't just capital. It was a blueprint. We paired founders with elite technical teams, offered cybersecurity infrastructure as part of the seed package. We built safeguards into contracts to protect female CEOs from being ousted in boardroom coups. I didn't want to just write checks. I wanted to rewrite the rules. Within days, our inbox was overflowing. Engineers, creators, founders who had been grinding in silence, waiting for someone to bet on them without asking them to shrink first. And this time, I was the one at the table, with the pen, the power, and the plan. Daniel didn't reach out again. Madison resurfaced in a magazine 2 months later, smiling through a wellness retreat feature that barely mentioned her marriage. No surprise there. Stratus Core? They replaced our services with a budget firm that didn't last 3 weeks. Internal breaches hit the headlines by Q3. And even though I had nothing to do with it, people still tagged me in the comments, like I'd become some kind of myth. The sister who saw it coming, the woman who walked away, the founder who fought back, with code, not noise. And honestly, I liked that version, because I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge. I had results. And that's the kind of noise no one can silence. They tried to erase me from the table. They called me the nanny, the assistant, the afterthought. They put me in the corner, near balloon animals and melting ice cream, thinking I'd smile and stay quiet like I always had. But what they forgot, what they never even bothered to ask, was who built the damn table in the first place. I wasn't a guest, I was the architect. They saw a quiet girl in the corner. I was writing code while they were writing off my worth. They underestimated me in every room, until one day I turned the lights on, and they realized I'd been running the building the whole time. You can survive being overlooked. I did for years. But survival isn't the goal. Not anymore. The moment you start respecting yourself, really respecting yourself, you stop waiting for a seat. You stop asking for space. You stop hoping they'll recognize your value. You start deciding who deserves to sit with you. You start drawing your own blueprint, raising your own walls, setting your own table, and you only invite people who know what it means to earn a chair. Let them underestimate you. Let them whisper. Let them mislabel, misplace, dismiss. And when they come crawling back, trying to renegotiate the truth, smile. Not out of spite, out of clarity, because you no longer need their validation. You have something stronger. You have yourself. My name is Claire Jensen, and I don't just build systems, I build empires.